Welcome to this new automotive news video, the first of this new week of March 9, 2026. And today we're going to talk, for example, about Stellantis, which keeps backpedaling on going fully electric, and at the same time is increasing investments in combustion engines. We'll also talk about Mercedes, which is unveiling a new entry-level version of its electric GLB SUV. About Porsche, which is preparing to overhaul its entire lineup and focus on a smaller number of models. We'll also talk about Audi, which is simply discontinuing one of its most iconic models. And finally, we'll talk about a new shortage that's slowly but surely emerging, that of used vehicles, which is leading to a general increase in their prices. These are the topics for this first video of the week. I hope you'll find them interesting. If that's the case, as usual, I'm counting on you to show it by leaving a like and boosting this video. If the option appears for you, by subscribing for the next ones. And of course, as usual, also by leaving a comment where you share your thoughts on today's news. As I was saying, we're going to start this video by talking about some new developments that show Stellantis keeps backpedaling. When it comes to electric cars, that's the new plan from Antonio Filosa, the new head of Stellantis, focusing more on combustion engines and hybrids than on electric cars. This is already evident in several strategic decisions the group made recently. Let me give you a brief overview. The abandonment of battery plant construction in Germany, the return of diesel engines to European lineups, and the return of V8 gasoline engines in the United States, as well as Stellantis pulling out of several joint ventures that were aimed at developing gigafactories, battery plants, such as the Nextar Energy Project, which was supposed to take place in Canada, and the Star Plus Energy Project, which was supposed to take place in the United States. Today, we learned it's now certain there won't be a battery plant in Termoli, Italy, despite previous plans for one, developed by the electric car battery company ACC, which is the company co-founded by Stellantis and Total. It's not going to happen, that's now certain. Since they already have a site there, Stellantis now prefers to invest 41 million euros to do two things. First, to develop new production lines that will allow them to produce the IDCT gearbox, which is a gearbox for hybrid vehicles, but also to maintain the production of 3 combustion engines that already exist within the Stellantis lineup. The first one is the GSE Firefly engine, which is more or less expected to replace the 1-liter PureTech on Stellantis Group French brands cars, as well as the 4-cylinder gasoline engine. GME, which is made in Europe, in Italy, but is mainly sold and installed on Jeep Wranglers, Grand Cherokees, for example, as well as the 2.9L V6, which can be found under the hood of the Alfa Romeo Quadrifoglio Verde. A new production plan has been developed for this factory, which previously lacked a clear future. A plan that should allow about 1,300 employees to keep their jobs out of the 1,800 currently hired at the site. Discussing strategic change, let's also mention Porsche, which is currently reducing its lineup. That means basically they're sorting out which models are selling and which ones aren't. And they're also trying to avoid as many unnecessary expenses as possible. It's in this context that they're looking to eliminate these duplicates, meaning different models aimed at the same target audience, which cannibalize sales and hurt the brand's profitability. For example, the Taycan and the Panamera. These two models are exactly in the same segment, meaning luxury GTs. Both models are very expensive to produce and develop, because even though they look similar visually, underneath they're not using the same parts at all. On one hand, we have the Panamera, which uses combustion or hybrid engines. It currently sits on the MSB platform, which is shared with other models from the Volkswagen Group, like the Bentley Continental GT, for example. And on the other hand, the Taycan, which is 100% electric, is built on the J1 platform, which is also used by the Audi e-tron GT. Porsche plans in the future to reduce production and development costs for these models, to merge them again, so that the future replacement for these models won't be 2 different cars, but rather a single one, which will have a 100% electric version, but also a hybrid engine version. Even though the platforms might differ and Porsche would still need to invest in both engine types, this would let Porsche achieve economies of scale. On top of everything else, it still raises 2 questions. The first is, which name between Taycan and Panamera will survive? We can assume Porsche will likely choose Panamera, since it's been in the lineup longer. The next question is whether Porsche will do the same for the Macan, since, as a reminder, on the European market, for example, the Macan now only exists as a 100% electric version, and Porsche has announced that in the coming years, a new SUV with similar size but equipped with a hybrid combustion engine will arrive on the European market, with a different name than Macan. That's not the only questionable strategic move we've seen from Volkswagen Group lately. Since we've just learned that at Audi, the flagship of the lineup, a model that has existed since 1994 is simply being discontinued. That's it. It's as simple as that. Indeed, Audi has just removed the Audi A8, the brand's large luxury sedan limousine, from its catalog. So it's not that surprising because in recent years, since 2021, Audi had more or less neglected this model. The last generation came out in 2017, facelifted in 2021, and since then, there have been no further updates, which means that a more modern Audi A6 or A5, which is actually lower in the lineup, ends up with much more advanced onboard technology than the Audi A8. A lack of investment from Audi and its flagship model has caused its sales to gradually plummet. And that's happened in pretty much all its markets, whether it's in China, Germany, the United States, or France, where Audi, for example, only sold 13 of them in 2025. When I say it's being removed from the catalog, I mean Audi is ending the current model with no replacement plan. Audi now prefers to focus on SUVs as well as on sedans that are a bit less high-end, like the A5 or the A6. Even at Audi, the limousine sedan is likely to be gone for good. At BMW and Mercedes, they continue to develop their main former rivals, the Mercedes S-Class and the BMW 7 Series, which continue to have engine upgrades, as well as technological advancements, which means that in the long run, there is a strong chance that Audi will completely disappear from this sector, totally eclipsed by the competition. By the way, still on the German brand side, I wanted to quickly tell you about a new entry-level version of the SUV, GLB, on which Mercedes is applying exactly the same strategy as it did with the CLA, that is, arriving on the market with mid-range models, then, little by little, adding versions that are a bit less expensive. The GLB, which is actually based on the same architecture as the CLA, the 820 architecture, and the MMA platform, is now getting a new trim, a new version. For now, it's 100% electric. Let me remind you that the GLB, just like the CLA, will also have a version with a combustion engine hybridized in a few months. In the meantime, it's the GLB 200 version, which is now official, that will come with a 58 kWh battery, compared to 85 for the GLB 250 Plus, which until now represented the entry-level version of this model. So obviously, with a much smaller battery, the range is also much smaller. The GLB 250 claims 632 km range, WLTP, about 350 in real conditions on the highway. The GLB 200 with this 58 kWh battery announces 430 km range. You should count on more like 250 in real conditions if you do 100% highway trips. This new version is priced from 46,950 euros. And thanks to this lower amount, under 47,000 euros, it can qualify for the French purchase bonus, the CEE, which will allow, subject to income conditions, to benefit from about 7,500 euros off. It has to be said, in terms of range, it's terrible, because at 31,000 euros, that's 15,000 euros less, you get about the same thing with a Renault 5 Electrics. And over at Tesla, for 46,000 euros, you get a Model Y long range, which offers 650. The maximum charging power also decreases, as it now reaches 200 kilowatt compared to 320 for the version equipped with the 85 kilowatt battery. That's 50 less than a Model Y, and it's also much less powerful, since this new version develops 224 horsepower compared to 347 for a Model Y sold at the same price. So, as you can see, it's still quite expensive for what it is compared to the competition. And finally, I wanted to talk to you about another topic, which is an upcoming shortage, that of used cars. Because of the drop in new car sales in France between 2019 and 2026, it's estimated that about 3 million fewer cars were sold, compared to the period between 2014 and 2019. 3 million cars that don't exist, and that could eventually create a real shortage in the used car market. This effect has also been worsened by the scrappage incentive programs, because in fact, to encourage the switch to electric cars, public policies have introduced conversion bonuses that gave people discounts when buying an electric car, in exchange for scrapping a vehicle considered old, knowing that at the time, a 2011 vehicle was considered old, even though in the end, that's not so old, considering the French car fleet now has an average age of nearly 13 years. So, fewer cars sold, and cars that weren't really that old were sent to the scrapyard. Two factors that will make supply scarcer while demand keeps increasing, for the simple reason that the price of new cars has skyrocketed so much that many French people are turning to used cars, which, even if it sometimes consumes a bit more, is also often much more reliable. As a result, even in the used car market, prices are also starting to skyrocket. There is a study that shows that, on average, in 2026 on the used car market for an equivalent model, you have to pay 30% more than in 2019. Because of the scarcity of supply and the increase in demand, automotive experts, especially those from Moody's and from Auto One, which is a huge German group specializing in the used car trade. For example, Auto Hero, that's them, even though it's not their only website at all. They estimate that used cars will cost 20 to 25% more by 2035. So, of course, the big question is, how will the price of new cars change by then? I should remind you that their prices have also increased on average in France by 30 to 40% between 2019 and 2026. And considering the multitude of new regulations that will have to be followed in the automotive industry in the coming years, it's not going to get any better. To be continued in any case, that's it for today's news. I hope you found the video interesting. If that's the case, I'm counting on you as usual to show it by leaving a like, subscribing for the next videos, and why not, by becoming a supporter through the join button below this one. See you tomorrow for the next one. Ciao.